Well, good morning or evening if you're watching in India or from points beyond. I'm Stephen Ezel. I'm the Vice President for Global Innovation Policy here at the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, ITIF. And we welcome you to today's event as we release a new report called Assessing India's Readiness to Assume a Greater Role in Global Semiconductor Value Chains. The report represents the successful work product of the U.S. India Joint Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technology, or iCET. The iCET, which the two countries unveiled in May 2022, commits the U.S. and India to expanding strategic technology partnerships and defense industrial cooperation between their nations' businesses, academic institutions, and government agencies. As part of the iCET inaugural meeting in January 2023, the countries agreed to develop a semiconductor readiness assessment to identify near-term industry opportunities, facilitate the longer-term strategic development of their complementary semiconductor ecosystems. This report represents the final deliverable of that readiness assessment and includes findings from two week-long trips that I made in May and October of last year to visit stakeholders throughout India's semiconductor ecosystem. ITIF was commissioned by the Semiconductor Industry Association and IASA, the Indian Electronics and Semiconductor Association, to write this report. The findings of this report will feed into the newly announced in March 2023 U.S.-India Semiconductor Supply Chain and Innovation Partnership MOU, which was signed between Secretary Raimondo and Secretary Poyal, which will take conversations forward around deeper collaborations in clean energy and semiconductor supply chains. So I won't make a formal, long presentation of the report, but I'll summarize some of its key findings. You know, the reality is that in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, amidst global geopolitical tensions, the emergence of new technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, et cetera, that the world confronts global supply chains for advanced technology industries that are reorganizing themselves in real time. So governments now have a unique opportunity to go before companies and present their nation's unique value propositions for how they can compete in high-tech industries to this global economy that's reorganizing in real time. And you know, when semiconductor companies consider where to cite globally mobile investments, they may consider as many as 500 discrete factors. And so what that means is that any country, region, province, or state that wants to attract semiconductor investment activity, whether that's in fabrication, design, or assembly, test, and packaging, have to not only get positive check marks on these 500 factors, covering everything from tax, trade, customs, immigration, labor, talent, policy, et cetera, but the strength of their check marks has got to be better than everybody else's in the world. And so that's what's really at stake here. The most modern semiconductor factories, those producing chips at process nodes of 2 or 3 nanometers, the process lines are so complex that they even factor in the gravitational effects of the moon on how it affects the semiconductor production belt. So what that means is that for countries that want to attract semiconductor manufacturing activity, the sophistication of their policy and business environment has to be on that level. It's almost a moonshot in a way. And so that's the challenge that confronts any nation, India, the United States, Israel, or any state they're in. And that's why it's so important that this study, which examines the broad milieu of policy and business factors that affect investment opportunities in India, is so important because it really affects everything that stakeholders have to get right. So the report ultimately finds that considering India's large and growing consumer and business marketplace, its existing strengths in electronics production, Apple may produce as many as a quarter of its mobile phones in India by 2025, and this global supply chain rebalancing, as well as the fact that India already accounts for 20% of the world's semiconductor design, India has a real opportunity at this moment to expand its presence in global semiconductor value chains. Ultimately, the report concludes that if India upholds its generous semiconductor sector investment policies, maintains a conducive regulatory and business environment, and avoids measures that create unpredictability, then in the next 5 years, India has the potential to expand its presence in the semiconductor assembly, test, and packaging, ATP market, to as many as 5 facilities, and to attract several fabs producing at least semiconductors at process nodes of 20 nanometers or above. So ultimately, I think a pretty positive story it tells of the opportunity before India. Okay, I'm now going to introduce our esteemed panelists and turn today's discussion over to them. But before I do, I want to let our audience watching online know that we'll take your questions via the Slido application. There's a link on the event webpage. So if you have any questions, submit those online, and we'll pick them up when we get to the Q&A period of our discussion. All right, we're going to have a total of 5 speakers today coming in at various times. We'll have a keynote from the Honorable Tarun Chhabra, who serves as Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Technology and National Security on the National Security Council staff. From 2015 to 2017, he served as NSC Director for Strategic Planning and Director for Human Rights and National Security Issues in the Obama administration. He previously worked at the Center for Security and Emerging Technology at Georgetown, and he holds degrees from Harvard in law and Oxford International Relations. Dr. Ajay Kumar has served as Commerce Minister at the Indian Embassy in Washington, D.C. since September 2023, and has served in the Indian Foreign Service since 2002. He previously served as Joint Secretary and Chief of Protocol, where he looked after the Parliament of India's inter-parliamentary cooperation, and past deployments have included stints at India's embassies in Cairo and Khartoum, Sudan. John Newver is President and CEO of the Semiconductor Industry Association, SIA. Prior to joining SIA, John served as Senior Vice President for Global Policy at the Information Technology Industry Council. And before that, he served 7 years at USTR and had been on the USTR team dealing with APEC and Japan issues. Joining us online is going to be Ashok Chandak. He is the president of IESA, the Indian Electronics and Semiconductor Association, which serves as India's premier industry body for electronics and semiconductors. He has over 3 decades of semiconductor and electronics industry experience, working in firms including Motorola, Infineon, and NXP Philips. And providing closing remarks at the end of our today is going to be Grant Harris. Grant is the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Industry Analysis. He was confirmed in April 2022 and leads 250 staff of experts who are working to maintain American competitiveness in industries worldwide. He had served in the National Security Council and State Departments during the Obama and Clinton administrations. So with that, let me turn it over to Tarun and ask him to make opening remarks. Thank you for joining us, Tarun. The floor is yours. You're fine now.
Everybody, thanks so much for being here today, and really want to thank in particular Stephen and colleagues at ITIF, at SIA, and IESA for their hard work on the report that's being launched today, and for a lot of time and persistent effort. I think the report that's being launched today is really emblematic of some of the important steps that are being taken by the United States and India together as part of a really deepening strategic partnership, and in particular to talk about today, obviously the complementary semiconductor ecosystems that we're trying to build through the Indian Semiconductor Mission and obviously through our own CHIPS efforts here in the United States to help us secure long-term competitive advantages in this crucial sector. And so before saying just a few words about the semiconductor ecosystem specifically, let me just take a step back and say a little bit about the technology partnership, the strategic technology partnership that we're trying to build together between the United States and India, and which we made a lot of headway on when the Prime Minister visited last year for the state visit. So since the inauguration of our joint initiative on critical and emerging technology in January of 2023, our 2 governments which called for this readiness report and noted the progress on it. We've had a lot of milestone achievements to date. So as many of you know, one of those is announcing co-production on the GE 414 engine in India that will power the Indian fighter fleet. There's more technology transfer as part of that deal that's really ever been approved for advanced jet engine technology. We're also making significant progress now on finalizing a major sale of MQ-9Bs to India on the defense side. There's obviously the major announcement with Micron mobilizing billions of dollars in investment in India's semiconductor ecosystem with the assembly test and packaging facility in Gujarat. Congress has introduced some legislation to lower regulatory barriers for U.S. exports to India for high-performance computing technology. There are lots of active partnerships in the telecom space to support Open RAN partnerships and deployment in India with trusted vendors. And we're also on the cusp very soon of launching the NASA ISRO synthetic aperture radar into space that will map the entirety of the Earth's surface twice every 12 days. And also sending into space astronauts, Indian and American astronauts together to the International Space Station, hopefully by the end of 2024. So all of this is paired with significant growth in trade and import investment. Two-way trade is on track to reach about $200 billion this year, with two-way investment flows approaching a record $100 billion. And while there are not formal MOUs behind the launch of iCET, it's really been underwritten by something much more foundational, which is a shared commitment to ensuring that this initiative delivers real outcomes driven by leaders in both countries. So we're looking forward to our two national security advisors meeting this spring in India to mark the second year of this initiative and set the vision for the next phase of this partnership. So with respect to the semiconductor sector and the report that's being announced today, really the driving policy impulse here is the need to enhance the resilience of our supply chains and coordinating our own domestic strategies in the United States and India, and actively friendshoring across a number of sectors, but semiconductors being high on that list, of course. And so from a US standpoint, our semiconductor work with partners like India is a really critical feature of our efforts to diversify supply chains where there's risk of over-reliance or production from any single country. And as SIA has documented before, if the United States were to try to do all this alone, it would be a multiple of 10 or so of what currently we're planning to invest with chips. And so we have to coordinate with our friends and partners around the world to build more resilience. As many of you know, the government of India established its own semiconductor mission in 2021 with an investment of over $10 billion in the sector, and that was a really important step forward toward meeting global demand for trusted manufacturing. And this complements, sorry, 10 billion, yeah, 10 billion. And this obviously complements the work of the CHIPS mission here, where we're looking forward to some major announcements in the coming weeks as well. So we're working to ensure these investments are going to be mutually reinforcing, including on the MOU on semiconductor supply chains that was concluded last March. And of course, there's a lot more work that we can do together to strengthen this partnership with really the recommendations that are outlined in the ITIF report. And really to ensure that some of the specific initiatives that made the announcement in Gujarat possible, to make those more systematic, more predictable, so that investments like that can become more of a pattern. And so just a couple final words, about the broader initiatives. We're looking forward to stepping up co-production and co-development of technologies that will position us to jointly offer low-cost alternative technology solutions to countries globally. Some of this you'll see in the U.S. India Defense Acceleration Ecosystem, or INDUS-X, which our DoD colleagues have just hosted in Delhi this week to support the co-development of defense technologies. We have the Innovation Handshake that's being led by Secretary Raimondo as well. And we're strengthening coordination with like-minded partners as well. So obviously work through the Indo-Pacific Quad with Australia and Japan, but also a new partnership between India, the United States, and Korea with a trilateral that we'll have in Seoul in just a few weeks. So to conclude, let me again thank our colleagues at SIA, ITIF, and IESA for the really hard work. And I'm confident this is going to pave the way for deepening this partnership. So thanks very much.
Morning, everyone. Thanks, Stephen, for my introduction. Good morning. Tarun, good to see you this morning, and thank you for covering the broader collaboration, what's happening between India and US currently, whether it is iCET, INDUSX, so many other defense-related things which you have covered. Of course, Quad, uh, trilateral, iCET trilateral with ROK, and also we are absolutely committed towards all those commitments, basically, and engagements. So that said, John, thank you very much for leading this entire effort from the US industry. And of course, Ms. Chandak is there connected with us, leading the Indian industry's efforts towards semiconductors. Since Tarun has touched on the broader landscape on what's happening in the technology collaboration space, so I'll focus primarily on the semiconductors. So first of all, Stephen and ITIF, I would like to compliment you for bringing together this India Semiconductor Readiness Report. We are absolutely looking at the opportunities which are highlighted in this report, and we are committed to actually taking forward to working towards those opportunities. This report is very critical from our perspective, and we are also actually preparing to go forward on this next step in our semiconductor readiness with OECD study. I'm sure people are working on this. I also would like to compliment SIA and IESA for actually leading the industry effort for taking this entire semiconductor industry forward. With this report, I strongly feel that now our industries need to actually seize this India semiconductor moment. And we as Government of India is absolutely committed towards that collaboration. We all know that why we are talking about this, basically. We all have seen that COVID-19 has taught us some of the very difficult learnings, basically. We have seen the large-scale disruptions in global supply chains. And of course, semiconductor was also not untouched. We have seen so much of supply chain deficits and so many other challenges with the semiconductors, and that has brought our two countries to first think of independently working on this space, basically with CHIPS Act in the United States. We also came up with this ISM, basically with $10 billion fundings to support this entire industry, to come up with resilient supply chains, to ensure that we have predictable supplies in the entire semiconductor value chain. We are very proud that we have been able to work with Micron, and I think it's a test case for us. And it is definitely giving an opportunity for other broader industries across the world, particularly in the United States, to actually look at this semiconductor opportunity. And we are ready to go extra mile. We have seen that Government of India has provided 50% capex on matching basis with the company's investments. And then state of Gujarat has came up with an additional proposals, basically, and then they have actually provided a significant amount of funding so that we are able to actually move forward on this. And then as part of this ISM, we are actually encouraging proposals to come further, and we are working on a number of strands on the at this moment. We are all aware that like in US states, basically, they are actually working tirelessly to actually attract semiconductor investments in various US states. Similarly, a number of Indian states are also competing with each other. Like our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi says that we are actually pushing our states in a competitive yet cooperative federalism, and then pushing states to actually outdo each other so that they are able to attract the necessary investments to work on this, putting together various pieces of the semiconductor industry in India. That said, of course, we bring a lot of value to the semiconductor supply chain, whether it's R&D, design, which is which India is definitely having a flourishing footprint as such in the R&D and design space. We also are very proud to have one of the most talented STEM educated graduates, and we are absolutely committed to work with the industry to see how we can actually complement the efforts of our industry and then meet the need of the human resource which is required for this industry. And in all these space, we do see United States as a very important partner to work on different stages of the semiconductor value chain together with the US government and US companies together. And we look forward to further discussion this morning. Thank you so much.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I must say I am extremely happy to be here to talk about this wonderful report, which is completed. It really is a very, very good body of work. It's been very important to get some numbers and analytics around how India can play a bigger role in our supply chains. I must say, we very much welcome India's enthusiasm for playing a bigger role. I've been around this block a number of times in my previous job and in this one, and it feels like things are different when it comes to India. The government of India is taking this very seriously. There seems to be good alignment across the ministries, across the agencies. As one example, when the first incentives package rolled out, the $10 billion package, which is when you add to the state incentives, makes India one of the most attractive places to invest in terms of government incentives. There were some problems with the first package that rolled out. The government reached out to industry, said, "What do you think?" We gave the government some candid views, and shortly thereafter, the program was adjusted to bring it what we thought was kind of more in line with the incentives that are available in other parts of the world. So it's just a different feel, and it feels like the government in India is heading in a good direction in all this. Having said that, and I want to save this for the panel discussion, there's always room for improvement. While the incentives are impressive when you compare it to incentives offered, manufacturing incentives offered around the world, there's some areas where, such as in trade policy, where India could improve things to affect some systemic change that would make it even more attractive to our industry. And I look forward to having that discussion this morning. I think it's critical. And then finally, the window of opportunity is open now for India. You know, when we came off the pandemic and the supply chain problems that we had, particularly with chips, it caused a lot of soul searching in industry and in governments. And one thing that was very clear for us that we needed to do some rebalancing of our supply chains, and that's going on in earnest. At the same time, it's projected that by 2030, it's about $590 billion, $80 billion industry right now is going to be $1 trillion by 2030. So there is tremendous growth potential driven by AI, driven by automotive, electric vehicles, Internet of Things. And our industry needs to get shovels in the ground and capacity in place to meet the coming demand. So, you know, as we looked at what happened during the pandemic, we realized we had a couple of vulnerabilities coming off of that. And that was, one of them was that about 75% of all of our chips are manufactured in East Asia. And East Asia has been a great place for our industry, and it will continue to be, but we need to think about spreading the risk around a bit more. And that's where India comes in with already a rich history in the design side of our industry. So my message to India and everybody else is, got to move fast. You got to get focused, because our industry is making decisions today about where fabs are going to be 2 to 4 years now to meet the demands as we run up to the end of the decade. So really look forward to the discussion this morning. Again, Stephen and your team, great report. I know you took a couple of trips out there, did dozens and dozens of interviews with folks, and we thought you came out with a very fine product. So thank you. Thanks.
Shot, go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Stephen, can you hear me?
Yes, you're golden.
Great, thank you. Good morning, good evening, everyone. And thank you very much for giving the opportunity to be part of the panel and discuss this particular topic. First of all, as we all know, semiconductor has been a very hot sector last couple of years. And I really congratulate and compliment ITIF for looking into the India story. Obviously, along with SIA, a key partner. A lot of things have been covered as a ground into this report. And the short summary has already been presented to all of you, and maybe some of you already gone through the content of the report. My view is we have to look now beyond this report, actually. Obviously, this is a very, very important step which establishes the current status and what can happen in future. Looking at in the midst of the global economic situation, India stands out at the beacon of a resilience and opportunity. The nation has demonstrated remarkable adaptability and also the growth potential, and a path towards becoming the developed nation by 2047 will not be complete without commitment to the innovation and a technology advancement. And that is where India and US, these two countries, have to play a very, very important role as a collaborative approach. So I must say India really aspires to build a further strong relationships in the semiconductor sector with the United States, given also the fact that most of the US-based semiconductor companies have something or else to be done with the Indian pool of talent. With almost 20% Indian engineers across the design ecosystem worldwide, including various US companies. And that's one of the base which really is very, very important from the future growth perspective. India has been thriving economy, and the last 10 years has been a very, very remarkable change in the trajectory of the growth sectors, including the electronics as well as the semiconductors, driven by the bargaining demand of the 1.3 billion consumers and a strong relationship which India is building with several countries, including particularly United States, is going to be very, very important. The geopolitical situations have been changing, and that creates the window of opportunity for the countries like India. Those who have been lagged behind into the semiconductor manufacturing space, though on a design perspective, they have been always very, very much ahead. And this is where I would see that all of us need to look at some of the findings of the report and look forward and see how we collaborate further. India's electronics demand has been increasing almost to $300 billion by 2025, and also in turn the semiconductor demand. So looking at the self-reliance perspective as well, this becomes a very, very important topic, not only for India, but I'm sure for the United States as well. So we know that the governments of both the countries have been very, very vocal and very supportive to this particular sector by providing some kind of a benefits and also the incentives to take away some kind of a difficulties in expansion as well, so that they can create the robust design-led manufacturing ecosystem and also pursue further as a long-term roadmap. So far, India has been doing most of the import for electronics, which situation has changed. Now, import intensive electronics is becoming more export oriented. And we look forward to the similar situation for semiconductors. Because by 2030, IESA has estimated that the semiconductor demand in India is going to be $100 billion plus. By that time, the worldwide semiconductor market itself will be 1 trillion. So it's a significant stuff, and which has a huge opportunity for the industries from both the countries. And there is one positive aspect I want to bring out to all of you is we see one major change in terms of the Indian industrial conglomerates and entrepreneurs are more willing now to expand into the semiconductor sector, which was not the case 5 years ago. And there are several examples of such collaborations between the United States companies as well as the Indian companies, not only for design services, but also from the manufacturing perspective in various sectors. So I would say right now we are at the right moment to take this forward much more vigorously, establishing the additional cooperations and collaborations between two countries. And we can take up more discussions as we go forward in this panel topics. But first of all, again, let me thank you once again to ITIF and all of you for giving a time to the India story. Thank you very much, and we go further.
Well, thank you, Ishak, and to all of our speakers. Let me remind our online audience that we can take your questions via the Slido app, and they'll show up right here on my phone. We'll take about 20 minutes for a moderated Q&A session, and then take questions from the audience. And I should note, Jay, you talked about the states, and I should note that the report makes a comprehensive analysis of the semiconductor strategies that have been developed by 4 Indian states, Gujarat, Karnataka, Odisha, and Tamil Nadu, and compares them to the strategies that have been developed in places like Arizona, Texas, and New York State in the U.S. Well, maybe I'll start by asking, I was struck, and honestly, I had not been to India since 2003. Since 2013 when I came in 2023. So that had been a decade for me. And I was struck by everywhere I went in Delhi, meeting with government officials, that they stressed that India was committed to moving from red tape to red carpet. And we saw that, and the report highlights a number of initiatives. In January 2021, India launched a regulatory compliance burden reduction initiative across all forms of government. Decreasing the number of steps that are required to bring, FDI into the country. In July 2023, you passed the Jan Vishwas Amendment of Provisions Bill that changed 183 provisions and 42 pieces of legislation to improve the ease of doing business environment in India. So I'd ask all this panelists here, what have you seen are some of the most promising steps in improving the ease of doing a business environment in India, and what hurdles remain in your eyes? Welcome anyone to take on that question.
Stephen, thank you very much. I think if you'll see in the last 10 years, we have actually taken a number of steps in terms of economic liberalization, in terms of incentive package to attract semiconductor industry, like to make it attractive for the semiconductor industry from across the world, basically. And when we actually rolled out this ISM, we were providing some kind of package. But when we heard back from the industry that they were talking about the kind of packages which are available in other parts of the world, and we got their message, and then we worked very closely with the company like Micron to ensure that what they are looking for, and to work backward to ensure that we are able to actually do things on the ground, basically. And all of us have actually seen that in less than 3 months from the announcement, they were able to actually go for groundbreaking ceremony. So that definitely reflects that India is following whole of the government approach, At the same time, we are absolutely committed to ensure that we are working very closely with the industry, as our industry is having so much of need for the semiconductors. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Steven, may I add?
Yes, please, Ashok.
Great, thank you. So surely things have changed dramatically, I would call, over last 10 years. But last few years has seen a major steps. And even overall ease of doing business, you can see India's ranking has changed. Empirical data is already available. But what India is looking at right now, doing multiple things at the same time, so that the major hurdles and requirements are being hurdles are removed, requirements are met. And I will give you a couple of other success stories. 3-5 years ago, nobody would have imagined that Apple will do maximum majority of the manufacturing of the iPhones in India. Things have changed. Today, they are doing a lot of manufacturing in India, and it's further expanding, actually. I have seen today news from Google, they want to build Pixel phones. And there are many such examples. Even in Chinese companies, actually, they have started doing Samsung electronics manufacturing is stepping up like a hockey stick last 2 years. And I bring this example because this is the indication of the favorable policies. And it is not only merely financial transactions. Obviously, the incentives are very, very important to get started. But beyond these incentives, what are being provided for the semiconductor sector, there are several other things. Those are being done, be it on a logistics side. Skilling initiatives are running into the country. The talent pool is being developed. And several industries and a government are looking and working together to see how we develop on further in next 3 to 5 years. Every day you would see in the media, there is some other news about semiconductor industry in India. And our ministry and government, they are very, very open and very, very committed to this particular sector. And I think this is one of the important topic which everybody is noticing now worldwide, not only in US, but also in Japan, Korea, and other countries. And that is one of the proof point I would call as this red tape kind of a perception is changing into the red carpet. And I'm saying that it's going beyond red carpet now, actually. Things are really on a fast track. And after Micron, we have seen several more announcements coming up, actually. So HCL is joining hand, one of the Indian conglomerate with Foxconn. There is a CG Power who wants to go into ATMP. Yesterday, one of the small medium enterprise called ASIP, they announced the ATMP. There was a EMS company called Keynes. So you see the things are getting into momentum. And I'm sure the things are getting further into the next step, which is more on the fab dream for the country. So these are some of the examples I thought it is appropriate to quote, that it's not only red tape changing, but also really it is working on ground.
Thanks, Ashok. I think you're absolutely on the mark. Things have changed in India, and it's kind of from a high level. The atmospherics have changed. There's more willingness to be creative by the government in finding solutions, and more willingness to be flexible, which is a change from my perspective. A lot of pieces of the puzzle need to come together for us, as Stephen said. There's like 500 variables in the stack of what we look at when we're looking to invest somewhere. I don't know if it's 500 or 1,000 or 300, but it's a lot. And one of the things where there probably could be some room for improvement, a little bit more red carpet laid out, is and I'm a trade guy, is in trade policy. There's probably too much clutter at the border in terms of customs clearance. Our industry, particularly on the manufacturing side, is incredibly global. We need to have smooth treatment at the border, whether it's for procedures or whether it's for tariffs. Our finished products, our products as they're being made, are constantly being moved around the world. When fabs are being built, parts and pieces and tools for the fabs come from all over the world, and so you need a trade policy in place that facilitates that and helps that. And there are some things, for example, where there could be room for improvement with India. There's this thing called the Information Technology Agreement out of the WTO. 1997, it put tariffs. It eliminated tariffs on a broad range of tech products, including semiconductors. In 2015, most of the participants in the ITA went the next step and expanded it and put eliminated tariffs on another 1.3 trillion in trade. India was not a part of that. It was a little disappointing. We're actually thinking of going the next step in ITA 3 and putting even more products at zero duty. So, and there's other kind of more specific things like our manufacturers deal in a lot of very specialized product. And for example, the tools, measuring devices, these are not like hammers and screwdrivers. These are 10, 20, $100 million pieces of equipment. And we need to move that stuff around the world, and we may have it in Arizona for a while and have to move it over to Southeast Asia or move it to India. Well, if it's a used good, it can't get into India. So there's specific things like that, and then there's broad things like India not being part of the ITA2 that would be very, very helpful. And then the other thing that's really on the horizon, very close on the horizon, is the moratorium on cross-border
E-commerce
data
customs
flows.
duties.
Thanks.
E-commerce customs
Yes,
duties
thank you.
moratorium.
And I'm actually going to Abu Dhabi next week for the big ministerial MC13 for the WTO. And they're going to be talking, the ministers can be talking about a lot of things from around the world. And one of the things they're talking about is renewing this moratorium. It's been renewed for every 2 years for the last 25, 26 years. Critically important, we think, for everyone involved in e-commerce, but for our industry, our designs are created all around the world, including many of them in India, and they're constantly flowing 24/7 around the world. Any kind of contemplation of putting tariffs on data flows would like create a real chilling effect for us. And it's no secret that India in the past has struggled with the idea of continuing this moratorium, and we hope it can be a constructive actor next week in the Middle East. So India's taken some big steps forward. Very excited about that, but there's also still some room for improvement, and we're very happy that was all included in the ITIF report. And I also say very excited that India is looking forward to doing this OECD assessment as well. I think the more kind of third-party perspectives on India's readiness just lends greater credibility about India's enthusiasm for going forward.
I'll just add to that. ITIF released a couple of weeks back a report looking at the Dominican Republic's readiness to assume a greater role in semiconductor supply chains as well. And we've had other stakeholders here from Latin and South America asking the same question, and especially to the South American countries. The reality is that countries that are not in the Information Technology Agreement have seen their participation in global value chains for the production of ICT goods decline by over 70% since the agreement went into effect in 1996. It's why Brazil and Argentina, frankly, have virtually no ICT production capability anymore. Because the reality is, if you're not a country that provides a zero-in, zero-out tariff environment for the movement of the inputs and components that drive this industry, you simply get circumvented in global semiconductor value chains. So that's why, from my point of view, it's important that countries are members of the ITA, and it's good that India is a member of ITA 1. Although John says that we'd like ITA 2 to be part of that game board as well. Go, John.
Yeah, it's definitely something that our industry looks at when they're thinking about investments overseas, and participation in the ITA is not the magic bullet, but it's an expression of government policy that tells you about other things happening in the government that are favorable or unfavorable in terms of plugging into our supply chains. And countries that are part of ITA 1 and ITA 2, they're doing everything else right as well. And if they're not part of the ITA, there's other problems going on, and our industry does not invest in those countries.
I will add to the beginning of this conversation that the report does have a segment on kind of the lessons learned from India's efforts to attract Micron. I think they were a lot. They were very impressive. As you alluded to, John, a lot of adaptability and flexibility in program design. The structure of the India Semiconductor mission, the Semiconductor program was changed. Originally, it was contemplating investments only in certain very advanced process nodes. Was changed to accept applications for all types of process nodes. The application period was extended to late of 2024. The incentive structure was deepened and expanded. And very impressive, I think, was in particular the ability of India and Micron to work out advanced pricing agreements of international company 3 to 4 years to work with the government somewhere in the world to work out these APAs. And I think India is to be commended because that agreement was worked out within 6 months very rapidly. So I think a lot of lessons learned. Which leads me to my next question, to bring in our American stakeholders as well. Obviously, we have passed the CHIPS and Science Act. Our CHIPS Implementation Office has been very active recently, saw the investment in global foundries. So the reality is we have the United States and India that are both working to attract globally mobile semiconductor sector investment. And sure, maybe you could share what are some lessons America has learned so far from our efforts with the CHIPS Act, the CHIPS Program Office, our implementation efforts, and what can U.S. and India learn from one another in this regard?
Yeah, thanks very much. And my colleague Grant can speak a little bit more to this when he arrives. But I think a few things. One, everything costs much more than we expected. Some of that is construction costs, which have gone up across the board. And some of it is also obviously that there's global competition, right? Trying to attract many of these companies that are vying for incentives as well. And so, we are focused on kind of more coordination. I think particularly as we have a better sense in, as we map out where we're likely to land investments here, as our colleagues in Europe get closer to understanding that, in India, Japan, that's going to enable more coordination, I think, across our governments, which will help us focus investments as well. So that's definitely one. I think, I think another is workforce challenges, right? Which we hear a lot about from industry. This is obviously an area where India has a lot of strengths, and I think we could actually work together and see where the Indian workforce, I think, could be supportive of our efforts here and vice versa. So that's another, I think, area for us to dig in on. I think, I just come back to your previous question, Stephen, where I think we're in a phase of the partnership where there is very high level commitment to get big things done, big deals across the finish line. But they're proofs of concept, I would say, right now. And so you've walked through, what enabled the Micron deal, for example, and you could tell a similar story about some of the other milestones that I talked about earlier. I think where we want to go now is to find a place where the environment, and this is really an issue on both sides, the regulatory environment here in terms of, ITAR and export controls, and then similarly the regulatory environment in India, as you and John have talked about, enable us to kind of routinize deals like this. So it's not just that there's a lot of effort from the top in both systems to enable single deals, but we turn those proofs of concept into more of a pattern. And so that's really what we're, I think, trying to focus on now in both governments.
Great.
If I
Ajay, go ahead, yes, please.
Thank you, Tarun, for taking up this question. Basically, if we talk about learnings from the United States, we do see that we have learned quite a bit from the global practices while actually bringing out this ISM as a mission in India, basically, and then we have benefited from the knowledge what companies have shared with us. That's how we were able to actually work backward to actually ensure that we are able to work on this Micron deal. One is that. Another is we have seen that how US states are actually working in attracting investments. And there is so much learning for our own states to actually see we have to do things differently. We have been doing things in certain manner in the last several decades, but we know that we have to do things differently, and we are actually trying to do things differently, and we are really committed towards that. In terms of another learning, basically, like we have seen that the US industry, US government, US academic institutions, they all work very closely. There is so much of synergy. And what we think that when it comes to upgrading the skills of our educated human resource, we have to really have industry academia partnership, basically. So this is something which we are definitely picking threads from the experiences in the United States. And I'm sure we are working on similar lines, basically. Thank you.
Great. And that got to the next topic I'd like to address more deeply. And that is, the reality that, the world faces a global shortage of STEM talent. John, I know SI has recently released a report on this topic in the US and globally. I guess the estimate is we need 1 million more individuals trained to work in the semiconductor industry over the next decade. And of course, India has a deep pool of human talent in this space, already 125,000 engineers working in the industry. You graduate 800,000 engineers a year, although I understand only about 10% are ready to go work directly in the industry when they come out of school. So maybe, Ashok, you could talk about some of the, I think, really interesting initiatives that we documented in the report. Your Chips to Startup, your CTUS program, seeks to train 85,000 high-quality and qualified engineers in VLSI and embedded systems design here over the next decade, as you turn India into, quote, a semiconductor talent nation. Maybe you could share more about India's plans to develop the workforce here, and then also how we can deepen collaborations. For instance, I know there's now an India government Purdue University program to develop courses in semiconductor systems that can be offered in India.
Sure, thank you. So surely India's strength has been on the design, and since 1985, I would call, India's design engineers have been contributing to the global semiconductor sector. And more than 20% of the global workforce today is Indian talent. Plus, there are several thousand engineers, those graduate every year. So talent supply pool is quite large. And the STEM remains one of the major attraction for the students, including also that results into the cost competitiveness for the various companies. However, it is, I would give a very simple example. Some of you might be aware that India is very good in polishing the diamonds. I mean, probably India is the largest pool of people, those are doing the polishing of the diamonds. And that is what India is trying to do now more on this high-tech sector. Having so many thousands of engineering graduates coming out, we need to put them to the right path, as well as provide them the right skilling and the talent development. And there are several programs those are running. So that includes the Electronic Sector Skill Council, which was identified and operational in India, developing and skilling those talents. Plus, there are semiconductor industry and academia research collaborations. Those have been also working, and a lot of I must say agree that lot of US-based companies are part of this program actually, in terms of the academic STEM institutes. Plus, there is a chip to silicon concept which is coming up, that is going on. There are startup related initiatives which provide the young graduates opportunity to experiment or take the risk and also build further. So on the design related topics, it's very well established and it is in a momentum. The challenge still remains on a manufacturing side. And this is where the industry, the institutes and government are now working together to expand that activity further so that we create more skilled manpower. For the ATMPs, those are getting developed in India. I already mentioned there are 5 companies announced the plans. Very soon, a few fabs would be announced and they would get operational over next 3 to 4 years time frame. So that is the thing we need to build up. So overall, it's one of the very, very high priority agenda for both industries in India as well as the government initiatives. And we're also looking at more collaborative approach. And give an example, next week, we are holding one conference on the semiconductor packaging and research. And there are at least 30 more countries, the people, the talented leaders, as well as the engineering pool who are traveling to India to join this conference actually. And 2 weeks ago, we had another conference, which was led by IESA, similar stuff. The talented people from various countries, including India, are really joining hand now to expand this scaling initiative. And this is going to be very, very important, I would call. And this is where India really look forward to contributing to the global requirements and enabling the success. Finally, the opportunity is going to be very huge. As we know, $550 billion semiconductor industry is growing to $1 trillion, and it enables more than $10 trillion of digital economy as well. So this is going to be most important activity, and we are working very hard on this, as I mentioned.
Great. Go ahead, John. And let me say, after John's remarks, we'll take any questions we might have from the audience here.
Just a quick observation. Actually, I'm fairly optimistic about the workforce challenge. For sure, it's enormous. We, India, everyone is facing this vis-a-vis our industry around the world. We actually have a lot of STEM talent. It's just that STEM talent's not being driven into our sector as much as it needs to be. For us in the U.S., a lot of STEM talent comes out and wants to develop the coolest app, and not necessarily come and design semiconductors. But I'm hopeful for a number of reasons. The first one is we're all focused like lasers on this, government and private sector, and a lot of programs are going into place to address this problem. Second thing is a higher level one. When I took my job here at SIA 9 years ago, semiconductors were kind of sleepy. No one knew what they were except 18 people in the world. And
As my wife often says when I come in at the end of the day, semiconductors, what are they good for?
exactly, thank you. So coming out of the pandemic, though, that's changed. People now realize that if they're gonna be able to buy their new toaster or their new refrigerator or their new car or their new computer, they got to have the chips. And so I think semiconductors for a whole young generation have become important and interesting again. And I'm hopeful that more of the STEM talent coming out of schools, that'll be in the back of their minds and thinking, well, maybe I want to go over here to work in an industry that's really important for our societies.
Stephen, could I just add one point?
Please,
Sorry.
yes.
So I very much agree with John, and I share that optimism. I think obviously the CHIPS program here has a laser focus on workforce development. So that's really critical for all of the investments that we're making. In addition to that, the Biden administration has been very focused on STEM talent, immigration as well. And so we've launched a number of initiatives, and you'll see some of the regulation coming out to enable that. And the semiconductor industry is top of mind as we roll those out. And obviously India could be, a key partner when it comes to that immigration. And that, I think, could also in turn benefit India, as you have Indian engineers working here and then working in the Indian semiconductor sector too, as it develops. But I want to add one point, which I think is really important from, certainly the perspective of this administration, which is, President Biden's been very, very focused on ensuring that labor colleagues have a seat at the table on everything that we're doing, particularly the CHIPS program as well. And we're in this for the long haul with India, this partnership. And so I think it's really crucial that our labor colleagues are at the table with us as we develop these initiatives, whether it's in the defense sector, whether it's in semiconductor sector as well, so that their views, kind of their interests are represented. And I think that we can make this work because we are hopefully opening a market that's going to enable more manufacturing in the United States, as it's enabling more manufacturing in India as well, if we start this in the right way and have a big tent and include our labor colleagues from the outset.
Stephen, can I just take?
Please, yes.
Pick up a thread, basically. So I think what Mr. Chandak and John and Tarun said, basically. So on this workforce challenge, basically, you have already talked about this Purdue University, IIT Mumbai MOU. Like all of you are also aware that LAM Research is closely working on this upgrading human like semiconductor skills. They have already reached an agreement with the IISc Bangalore, one of the prestigious science institution in India, basically, and working on their semiverse training, basically. I'm sure this even this AMD, they have been working on this upgrading semiconductor skills in India piece also. So there are a number of threats which are already going on. I do see that there is little more effort required from both our governments, basically, to work on some structured workforce development to meet the upcoming needs of the semiconductor industry in our two countries. Thank you.
And hopefully that'll be a part of the supply chain partnership discussions going forward. You know, I'll also add that the front part of this report kind of has a theoretical exploration of the question of why India should focus on semiconductors. There's so many priorities that your country, as any other country, has. So many industries you could focus on: pharmaceuticals, aerospace, et cetera. So, but one of the points it does make is, you know, in the United States, every semiconductor job supports 5.7 other jobs downstream in the economy. But actually in India, the effects are even stronger. Every one job in an ICT industry in India supports 16 jobs across the rest of your economy. So there's even a more powerful downstream indirect employment effect there. And I think the reality is, if India can master the policy environment to support semiconductor competitiveness, then that means you really master policy environments to compete in other industries globally as well, which was a theoretical explanation for why it's important that India should compete in semiconductors. Okay, any questions from our audience here? Great. If you would, please just identify yourself and the organization you're with.
Thank you very much. My name is Sato from CSIS. And actually, that originally come from Japanese financial governmental institutions. So Japanese companies also the very, how can I say that, regard that India is a very promising country. According to that our 30 years survey, also that India is the #1 country that in the middle future. But on the other hand, that the companies always how can I say, concerned about the infrastructure like electricity and water, and also the implementation of the legal framework. So, and also that on this field, that I understand that a lot of the country other than the India, like Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and Costa Rica, where that I will travel next month with the CHIPS office, they would like to really invite the CHIPS investment in their countries. So compared with other countries, that what is that the India's that are best or attractiveness for the investment in India? So thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. If you talk about the infrastructure development, we have seen now more than 20 years of physical infrastructure development, not only just 4-laning of major highways, but building multiple expressways. We are currently working on this Delhi-Mumbai corridor, industrial corridor, and it's going to actually provide the fast speed world-class infrastructure. We are actually building so many ports, basically. We have the plans to actually develop more than 100 airports in tier 2, tier 3 cities. We have plans to actually bring in metro rail in 50 major cities in India. So if we talk about infrastructure development, if we talk about water-related projects, electricity-related projects, in the last less than a decade, basically, we have added, or rather less than 5 years, basically, we have added 170 gigawatts of clean energy to our grid, basically. So we are absolutely working on all these parameters, which are critical for not only semiconductor industry, but various other industries also. So we know that we are working in a globally competitive environment. There are other destinations which are definitely working on attracting the same investments, possibly what we are looking for. So we know that we are in that competitive global environment. So we are absolutely working on those trends. Thank you.
Just two of India's strongest suits are one, obviously, workforce. Just it's got the kind of most robust, largest talent pool to draw from. And the second one is, as I mentioned earlier, the incentives packages are not everything, but they're a piece of it. The Indian incentive package is very strong.
Stephen, I may add one more point here. So that's a very good question. As every country is trying to attract semiconductor topics into their own backyard. So in addition to the talent pool, the design competencies, those are existing now in India, which really adds to the design-led manufacturing initiative, which is one of the attractiveness. Number two, India itself is going to be the huge domestic market for the various companies, and semiconductor is the core of that actually. As I have indicated, $100 billion of semiconductor demand is coming up. So for anybody who is setting up the operations in India, for them, it's the ready market to be served as well as the exports, what they would do. In addition, as your report already captures, within the semiconductor manufacturing overall value chain, there are 300, 500 different elements, those are required. And there are two I want to highlight here. One is the chemicals and the gases. India has got a very good thriving chemical industry, and India is exporting right now to 80 countries, the specialty chemicals. Some of that is going to the semiconductor chip industry as well. So some of the elements, those are required into the value chain of the raw materials. These are existing. Obviously, they are not the semiconductor industry grade so far, but the entrepreneurs are very, very committed, and already this industry has started to look at. So that way, I would say across the value chain, right from design to the chemicals to gases to the ATMPs, those are expanding to the semiconductor fabs and a marketplace. Entire value chain gets covered over here, and that is, I would call, is one of the most attractiveness, in addition to the talent pool that is keep developing, and there's a huge pipeline. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Jeff.
Thank you, appreciate it. Hi, Jeff Bean with ORF America, based here in Washington, D.C., which is a U.S. Focused think tank that has close relations with India, with Observer Research Foundation in Delhi, and obviously our Rasina dialogue is ongoing this week. So I know there are panels that are focused on this and other areas. I have two quick questions. Stephen, I want to commend you for an outstanding report and assessment. Two areas I wanted to dive in on for the panel. The first being, you mentioned this assessment of demand, which you break down in the report in a pretty detailed way for future consumption within India domestically. One of the things we've heard from industry, particularly in chips, is that that's an area that they watch quite closely in terms of making an assessment for future investments. How much confidence do you have, and maybe others have thoughts as well, on that $110 billion figure, which would represent a 5 times increase from 2019? I think that speaks for itself. So anybody that has any questions about that. Tarun wanted to look a little bit deeper at what you discussed in the context of what needs to happen to make some of these deals more routine and not requiring top-level political push from everybody across the ecosystem. This could go into a number of areas within U.S. India, but in the context of ITAR, in the context of other hurdles that you see to institutionalizing some of this cooperation. Would appreciate your thoughts on that and others. Thank you.
Anyone? Go ahead.
So I may add here actually, recently IESA, because IESA keep doing a lot of research reports, and one of the topic we do is the market research report. And just about last month, we released, we have finalized the report. In fact, we are releasing by end of this month. And I can give you a glimpse of that. In year 23, we estimated the India's semiconductor demand was overall about 38, let's say $40 billion already. And that included obviously bulk of processing and a memory because of the smartphone manufacturing, which is predominantly being done out of country. And we have very clearly done methodical articulation of how this demand increases going forward to 2030. And that is reaching $100 billion. And I'm very confident that this is where we see, and maybe it could be more as well, in case the export initiatives, those are taken by some companies, fruitfully get into the on-ground situation. And in that, we see $33 billion is going to be processing and $20 billion is going to be memory. And this is where the companies like Micron are going to substantially benefit of the local demand which is coming up. Plus the power sector, because of the EV, electric vehicles, the two-wheeler, 20 million two-wheelers are made every year, and about 4 million passenger cars. That also add more than $10 billion of the power demand itself by 2030. So the demand is for real, I would call. Many times this is not visible by the sales marketing community in India because it's a direct ship by many companies or in a kit form, and that is also being addressed. So I'm pretty confident this demand is increasing to that level based on the research which we have done. Thank you.
Let me just throw a perspective in there, and that is when our companies build manufacturing facilities around the world, they don't build for a domestic market. They build for a global market, and that's just the way it works. And that's the scale. That's how the scale works on our industry. So whether India hits the $100 billion target or not, it is not. I wouldn't over-index on that because we're building for the global economy, not for any particular domestic economy.
So look, I think on the Indian side, taking up the recommendations in this report would go a long way. I think to routinizing, I think some of the deals that we all want to see, and John has gone into some depth, I think, about some of those. I think on our side, I think there's just updating that we all have to do, both with respect to the strategic environment we're in, and also developments in technology that were not anticipated when some of the regulations that were that are enforced today were settled. So think about a couple of examples. We actually want to do a lot together when it comes to commercial space, and so there are challenges sometimes when it comes to launch vehicles, right, and collaboration there. I mentioned the NISAR project, right? That just gives you one example, but there's a lot more that could happen that's not government to government, but in the commercial sector. Another is meeting India's energy needs and the ways that we could collaborate there, including with respect to nuclear energy, right? I don't think that when the nuclear deal was settled that people were thinking about small modular reactors, right, and what the potential there is, particularly for India. So those are just a couple of examples where I think we're focused on what initiatives that could clearly be in the interest of both the United States and India, and kind of meet the moment in terms of our strategic challenges.
Great. John, here, go ahead.
And just taking this up a couple levels, governments getting along is something industry really likes, and the recent embrace, the tighter embrace between Delhi and Washington really helps us in our decision making as well. And as long as that stays on a positive, forward-leaning trajectory, we're much more likely to be positive about expanding in India.
Great. One more question from our audience here.
Yeah, thanks very much. Eric Smith with the State Department. Thanks for the remarks on the panel. A question about the report addresses the competition among the states in India, and identifies that as positive in terms of attracting investment and who's going to offer the best incentives. My question is, to what degree does that present a risk then that this also might exacerbate this sort of patchwork of a regulatory environment, and to what degree can that be mitigated by sort of federal level overarching policy? Thanks.
Ajay or Ashok?
Thank you for the question. Like we in India have a very clear demarcation of subjects in our constitution. What subjects are dealt by the state, what subjects are dealt by the federal level. And there is, we call it concurrent list. There are certain subjects which are dealt together. So we definitely do not see any conflict in that as such. So while federal government comes up with the federal policies, but at the end of the day, a lot of areas where state has like land is a state subject. So state then work very closely with various investors to actually handle those challenges basically. At the end of the day, it's a collaborative work. I understand that the federalism works little differently in this part of the world, but we are more like a union of states. And then we have a lot more collaborative effort at different levels, basically. Thank you.
I want to recognize some of the questions we received online just very briefly. The first question asked how the foundry player will secure electronic chemicals for chip manufacturing. Will they bring their own suppliers to India or develop indigenous capability? Ashok, I think you addressed that question a little bit with the strength of India's chemicals industry. The report also does, although it does note that while there's a deep chemicals industry in India, it's the world's 7th largest, it will need to enhance the purity to get to semiconductor grade chemicals more broadly. The question about other sectors of U.S.-India cooperation, to the questioner, see Tarun's remarks at the beginning of the presentation on collaboration in sectors like satellites, engines, and high-performance computing. Another question, India's STEM talent pool often skips top research universities. How to expand research opportunity for Indian engineers? I'll just answer that briefly. I think this is a challenge for India. The report points out that India's national R&D intensity, that's how much India invests in R&D as a share of GDP, is just 0.7%. That's actually the lowest of all the BRIC countries. I understand that the India Semiconductor program will allocate 2.5% of the $10 billion funding to R&D activities. So to the questioner, Satvik online, hopefully via the India Semiconductor program, there'll be more money for engineering research in India. Okay, I want to bring Grant Harris up. I do just, though, before we bring Grant up to close us out, want to ask if any of our panelists want to provide any closing or concluding remarks of their own.
Start from India. Let's give him a first shot.
Ashok, any closing remarks, concluding points from your side?
Thank you. So I would just say a couple of things here. One is, first of all, thank you very much for this very interesting panel discussion on this topic, and also interest from the audience and questions coming online. I would say we have started on a very interesting journey, and it is not easy. It's clear. It's not going to be easy. India is a bit late on the semiconductor manufacturing perspective. But considering the various aspects, those are being talked about, those are being implemented, we definitely see that this is going to be a successful journey. We are balancing the aspirations to the realities. For example, as also you mentioned in your report, Stephen, that India could have, let's say, about 5 foundries or fabs over the next 3 to 5 years. Our ministers are also saying the similar thing at this moment. But things could change dramatically. The point is there must be a starting point somewhere. And this is one of the important elements I want to bring out, that yes, we are very ambitious. Yes, we want to collaborate, particularly with US and other countries. And we want to really keep the aspirations high, build onto the strength what we have, onto the design ecosystem and the talent pool, but also be realistic, take those baby small steps, make a success out of it, demonstrate that things are really changed. And these successes would, I'm sure, would spur more demand. And I have taken the example of the electronics manufacturing particularly. I can see that some of the successes of the semiconductor manufacturing on ATMPs particularly, and a few foundries which would get announced very soon, would really trigger much faster growth trajectory. And all of us need to work together. And it is not only a question of what is being done in India. Today, this sector has become so global and so interdependent that finally it is very important that these two countries work together for a long-term perspective. And I really I'm happy that the things have already begun in the direction. Thank you.
I could not agree with Ashok more on that. And if you look at the history of our industry, all the players as as they kind of moved into our industry, whether it was Korea or Japan, they all started with smaller bites of the apple and grew to become superpowers. And what's very interesting for me and great to see is that I think the leadership in Delhi has come to appreciate the difference between aspirations and reality. And it's good to have aspirations of having a $20 billion sparkly fab someday in India, and that will happen someday. But there's a lot of steps to get there, and the focus should be on those incremental steps to get there, and that's what India is doing. I feel that the attitude in Delhi is the right one.
Stephen, like as we all know that semiconductor demands are growing in India, we have seen that the purchasing power of Indians are growing. They are more and more aspirational in terms of using tech goods, basically more and more. So we do see that there is going to be a semiconductor moment, which is for India at this moment, and we have got this breakthrough with Micron, and we know that this breakthrough is going to actually unfold in many more deals, basically in coming time. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. I want to thank you and John and Ashok for the work you've done here, because it's not just obviously the blood, sweat, and tears in getting the report done, but really the work you've done, I think, enshrines a couple principles that are really going to drive the relationship forward. One is we, as two governments now, and I think hopefully in an industry partnership, are committed to working with each other, and that means being candid. It means, being constructive and criticism to kind of make things happen. And you guys have really captured that really well, and I hope that's something that other sectors are able to pick up on and model as well. And the second is to hold us accountable as bureaucrats, because as we encourage industry players that you work with very closely to invest more, to work together more. You will inevitably have problems that we'll have to work on together, and I think what you're doing is going to make sure that we live up to the aspirations that we've set out together. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Drew. Okay, gentlemen, stay where you are, and we'll bring up here Grant Harris, who, as I said before, is the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Industry Analysis at the Department of Commerce, and he'll bring us home with some concluding keynote remarks. Thank you, Grant.
Great, that's a pretty tough act to follow, but thank you, Stephen, for having me. Thanks and congratulations to all who are involved in this report as well. I have a few minutes of remarks that essentially summarize one key point, and that is we're excited to take this report forward, and we're excited to have conversations, particularly government to government, about how we can be advancing these recommendations, these ideas, and also tackling some of the challenges too. As was mentioned, I have the honor of leading the Industry and Analysis Business Unit at the Department of Commerce. It's a team of over 275 industry experts and trade economists covering everything from critical minerals to airplanes. We have a chips team as well, and it's got, though this is not a humble brag because it precedes me, it's very well known for having flagged early on a lot of competitive pressure coming in the market many years back, and also both soliciting increased investment in the United States and seeking out international partners, including India, to be doing more cooperation and thinking about our investment climates and the broader semiconductor ecosystem. This also is the group here in Industry and Analysis that is carrying forward the work that Secretary Raimondo had announced back in March in establishing the Subcommittee on Semiconductor Supply Chain Innovation. She and Minister Goyal set an ambitious mandate for this group, and I think this report is very well timed for us to incorporate these ideas and to be thinking about what we can be doing together. I would note as well that industry connectivity is the defining feature of our day-to-day work, and in doing so, I thought the report was very helpful too in flagging some policy moves and some announcements that could benefit from additional consultation with industry, that could be in closer partnership as well. We're also, though, cognizant, as many of panelists noted too, that there are successes, I'm hearing from industry on the Micron investment in Gujarat that there's a welcoming, that there is progress being made. We're also hearing on some of the tariff issues and some of the investment climate issues that there's headroom and that there's an ability to be a stronger ecosystem, a stronger and more welcoming environment for investment. And that's something that we want to encourage and participate in. We're looking also to do more and more, of course, through the CHIPS and Science Act, also through our efforts on supply chains, both bilaterally with our friends and partners in the Indian government, but also through the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, and through our own efforts to launch a supply chain center and to really be thinking critically about how to support the strongest possible ecosystem and the most resilient and strong and secure supply chains possible. All of this work really, again, is well timed to have these kinds of ideas, to have this feed into the conversation. I think Tarun put it really well as our role. We want to work with industry. We want to work with our partners in the Indian government. We want to make this a reality. And we'll need to be seizing these opportunities and having frank conversations about the challenges addressed in the report. So congrats to all who've been involved. Again, so many great comments on this panel and this event, but we've got our work cut out for us in carrying this forward. Thanks for having me here. Great. Thanks so much. Thank you, Grant. Great.
All right, well, that'll close us out. I want to thank our audience in person and watching online for joining us today. I want to thank our panelists for their great remarks and presentations. A round of applause, please. Video of this event will be online shortly for you to pass it to your friends. And with that, ITIF looks forward to continuing to work with our stakeholders in industry and the U.S. and Indian governments to make semiconductor investments in India a reality going forward. Thank you all.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you.